Some criminals are so far gone that not even the death sentence is enough to remedy their crime. And even among them, these criminals stand as the worst of the worst. Among their ranks are Ted Bundy, son of Sam, the Green River Killer, and a handful of others who earned the title of the most dangerous criminals and prisoners in history. Are these average Joes turned into a notorious criminal the next day? Or are these people born psychos who have the fantasy to kill since their childhood? Let's find out together. Sit back and let's get to it with a famed serial killer. Number 1. Ted Bundy, American serial killer. Ted Bundy is one of the most notorious killers of the 20th century, and his crimes fit the title. Bundy lived with his mother and grandfather. It was not revealed to him that he was an illegitimate child. Instead, he was told that his grandparents were his adoptive parents and his mother was his sister. Accustomed to shyness and lack of social skills, he never made any friends and was bullied. In university, he had met a girl named Diane Edwards. He was very fond of her, but had broken up after a while. This is when a lot of his murders happened. Incidentally, most of the victims resembled Diane in their physical appearance. His first victim was an 18-year-old girl who had been sleeping in her bedroom when Bundy approached her. Sources say that Bundy had over 100, but he only confessed to 38. The horrible thing is that the murders were all over the state. Although he was studying in law school in Utah at the time, he would sneak from there and find victims in Colorado. In 1974, Bundy posed as a police officer and tried to get a girl to sit in the car. She did, thinking it was an actual cop, but when he forced handcuffs on her, she got the hint that he was not who he was claiming to be and jumped out of the car. She managed to escape and gave the police a description of his car. Eventually, the police ran a random traffic stop on Bundy in 1975 and found suspicious items in his car. This included a ski mask, a crowbar, handcuffs, and trash bag. It was later confirmed that his car matched the description of the girl who had escaped. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison for kidnapping a girl, but Bundy escaped twice from prison and could not be charged for his murders. After escaping, his bloodthirst nature forced him to take 3 more lives until finally he was arrested in 1978. The court sentenced him to 3 death sentences where he was to be executed by an electric chair. The execution took place in 1989, and Bundy died as a 42-year-old dangerous serial killer. Number 2. David Berkowitz, son of Sam. On June 1st, David Berkowitz came into the world as a result of wedlock, and that became his turning point to the dark side. Both of his parents were in an affair outside their respective marriages. Afraid of being exposed of their wrongful doings, his mother put Berkowitz up for adoption and listed the name of the father as her surname, Falco. Even living in a caring foster family, Berkowitz was trapped within his own darkness. He was told at the age of 5 years that his mother had died. He blamed himself for the death of his mother and was confused about his father's abandonment. Conflicted in his own thought, he did not do so well in school either and joined the army in 1971. His diary reports that he set about 1,500 fires in New York City during the 70s, but was never caught. After leaving the army, Berkowitz discovered that his parents were alive. So around 1974, excited about a potential reunion, he tracked down his mother. It did not go as planned, because that is when he found out about his illegitimate birth. That did not sit well with him. The guilt of killing his mother soon turned into a rage about being abandoned by his birth parents. This was also the time when he was deeply influenced by Satanism. Soon enough, Berkowitz's killing spree began. In 1975, he claimed his first spree and killed 2 women with a hunting knife. A year later, 2 girls were sitting in a car when Berkowitz came at them with a .44 caliber and fired 3 shots. Luckily, one of them survived. During the same year, 2 people were sitting in the car when the sound of the glass window shattering ruined their peace. Out of fear, the driver stomped on the gas pedal and drove far from the killer, surviving the incident. The spree continued until 1977, and the police could not find the culprit, but they had made a connection between the crimes because of the same gun used. They knew they were after a serial killer. The targets were similar too, mostly people seated in parked cars. In 1977, Berkowitz decided to change things once he got bored. The police were nowhere near to catching him, so he started sending letters to the NYPD and the newspapers signed as Son of Sam. Later in the year, the police found a yellow car that was synonymous in all the crime scenes and belonged to Berkowitz. They searched the car and found a letter signed Son of Sam, a duffel bag filled with ammunition, a rifle, and maps of the crime scene. The police eventually captured him, and Berkowitz showed no remorse. He was heard saying, "Well, you finally caught me." He pleaded guilty and confessed to all the shootings, and his motive, his profound interest in Satanism. Berkowitz's neighbor, Sam Carr, had a dog which Berkowitz claimed was possessed, and that demon is what used to tell him to do these heinous acts. This is also why he signed the letters as Son of Sam, as an inspiration from his neighbor. Berkowitz was sentenced to 25 years in prison for each of his murders. Number 3, Paul Bernardo, the Scarborough rapist. Bernardo was born to a wealthy but broken family. That became his primary inspiration for his disturbing personality. Kenneth was an abusive man who was married to Bernardo's mother. She was tired of her husband's abusive pattern and was forced to go to her former boyfriend. Kenneth knew of the affair but did not come in between their relationship. Ultimately, Paul Bernardo was born out of wedlock from his mother's relationship with her former boyfriend in 1964. When Kenneth molested his own daughter, Bernardo's mother had enough and separated herself from him. She took the children, and they lived in the basement of their Scarborough home. Bernardo had 2 step-siblings, and they were deeply affected by all the trauma. Surprisingly, Bernardo was a happy child. He remained unbothered at the time, unaware of what was coming next. At the age of 16, he found out about his illegitimate birth and verbally abused his mother. He separated from the family and went on to continue his education. During his time at the university, he started to develop patterns of sadistic behavior. He would often beat up the women he dated and was fond of publicly humiliating them. His barbarous behavior was encouraged when he met his now former wife, Karla Homolka, in 1987. She was interested in the same sexual acts as him, and together they became the Scarborough crime couple. In the years 1987 to 1990, he committed a series of assaults around the town. His targets would be young women who would be waiting at bus stations or in underground parking lots. He would sneak up on them and do unspeakable things to them for hours. The fear ran among the town, and a lot of young girls became victims of the trauma. Around 130 such cases were received by the police department. The cops also got 2 credible tips on Bernardo, which led them to take a 35-minute interview with him. He did not confess, but he also did not show any hesitation in providing his consent for DNA testing. Unfortunately, the testing was never complete. In the next 2 years, both Bernardo and Homolka partnered up and took the already horrendous crimes to the next level. There have been tens of assaults reported where the couple would stalk girls, pick a target, and abduct them. They even unalived 3 girls out of fear of being identified. One of the murders included Homolka's own sister. Their crimes came to an end in 1993 when the DNA testing finally took place. Bernardo's sample matched, and he was immediately taken under arrest. Homolka had signed up for a plea bargain and had told the authorities about all of Bernardo's crimes. She claimed that Bernardo had assaulted over 30 victims, which was more than the police suspected. Homolka was later released in 2005. On the other hand, Bernardo was convicted of multiple offenses, 2 first-degree murders and 2 aggravated sexual assaults. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole for at least 25 years. Thankfully, there is little chance that he will see the light of freedom because he was termed a dangerous offender. Number 4, Gary Ridgway, Green River Killer. Born on February 8, 1949, Ridgeway is one of the deadliest and most dangerous serial killers in American history. He was reported to have taken over 80 lives, and all of them were women. But he only pled guilty to about 48 murders. Growing up in Washington, he had a troubling past with his mother. When he used to wet his bed well into his teenage years, his mother would help him wash and rub his genitals. This led him to develop a desire to kill her, but he never pursued that desire. However, it led him to stab a young boy. His later years consisted of him graduating from high school, joining the U.S. Navy, and even starting a family. However, that was with little success. He had married 3 times over the span of 30 years and only had 1 son. In 1980, he claimed his first murder and killed a prostitute by choking her, but the investigations ran dry when he told the cops that she had bitten him. His killing spree did not start until after 2 years when he was arrested for solicitation. In only a span of 2 years, he had assaulted and killed about 40 women. Most of them were prostitutes or young girls who had run away from their homes. They were all found near the river, which gave him the name of the Green River Killer. This went on till 1998. Multiple times he was placed as a suspect, but strangely, he got away each time. He passed a polygraph test in 1984. Then, in 1987, a search warrant was issued to his house, but none of the items there had DNA that would match the sample of the victim. Eventually, in 2001, when the technology was advanced enough to provide evidence of his crimes, he was arrested. The trial ran for 2 years. Ridgeway claimed that his targets were runaways and prostitutes because no one cared about them. Plus, he also stated that he hated prostitutes and confessed to taking over 80 lives in 2017. He was given 48 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Number 5. Edmund Kemper, the co-ed killer. Edmund Kemper is better known today as the co-ed killer. Kemper was a middle child among 3 siblings. His father was a veteran, and he was deeply fond of him as a figure to look up to. The same cannot be said about his mother, who belittled him any chance she got. She would not show him affection because she thought that he would become gay. Kemper was big in stature, well above 6 feet, and that gave his mother a reason to make fun of him. She would favor his sisters more than him and often lock him in the basement because she thought that Kemper would hurt them if left unsupervised. Kemper's first murder was of a cat at the age of 10. After having successfully hidden it from his parents, he gained pleasure in lying and getting away with it. Later, his parents got divorced, and he was not happy to be living with his mother. He ran from the house in search of his father, only to find that he had remarried. His father took him in for a few years, but then sent him to his own parents' house at the age of 15. This is where his murder spree started. Kemper did not like his grandparents, especially his grandmother, who he claimed continually emasculated him. One day, in an argument, he got enraged and found his grandfather's hunting rifle. He picked relations with many of the police officers. One day, Kemper was driving around when he noticed groups of female hitchhikers. He started visiting those roads frequently with handcuffs and plastic bags in the trunk of his car. He picked up about 150 young women, but in most cases let them go without any harm. However, when his homicidal urges began to develop, he took 8 lives. He claimed that the young women sitting in his car would flaunt their beauty in front of him, and he could not control himself. He would abduct them, kill them, and then take the bodies home. In 1973, Kemper was sentenced on 8 counts of first-degree murder after he confessed to his crimes. Later that year, he was put in front of a jury where he asked for the death penalty by torture. Kemper's request was not only denied, but he was also declared sane. The court ordered him 7 years to life for each count. Number 6. Ed Gein, the Planfield Ghoul. On August 27, 1906, Ed Gein was born to a family of 3. He showed signs of obsessive and erratic behavior from his early years. His elder brother, named Henry, even expressed his concern about Gein, but they were never taken seriously. Initially residing at La Crosse, Gein's father was an alcoholic who could not keep a stable job. Selling his last business locally, he took the whole family and shifted to an isolated farm spread out at 155 acres in Planfield. Gein's mother was an extremist. She would keep the kids isolated in the house and taught them wrongful interpretations of the world. According to her, women were the creatures of the devil and incited sexual desires. Taking advantage of their isolated residence, she would teach her 2 boys to avoid going outside or to make friends. Despite all of this, Gein was incredibly obsessed with his mother. His brother would often warn him of the dangerous relationship he was forming with his mother, but that would only hurt Gein emotionally. One day, Gein was out in his garden burning marsh vegetation when a fire erupted and got out of control. The firefighters arrived at the scene and extinguished the flames, but Gein then reported his brother missing. It did not take cops long before Henry's dead body was found. The cops termed it as an accident at the time, but later reports show that Henry had bruises on his head. With Henry out of the picture and his father dying at 66 years of age, Gein was all alone with his mother. His obsession only grew until one day she died due to a stroke, and that is when Gein fully embraced his dark side. A couple of years later, in 1957, Bernice Worden, a store owner, was reported missing by her son. The cops pulled their sleeves up to find the culprit and were ultimately led to Guy's house. Her dead body was found dangling upside down and her head separated from her body. She had been shot with a rifle and then horribly mutilated. But that is not where the horror scenes ended for the cops. During the search of the house, they found multiple items that were covered in human skin. A lot of organs like the heart, vulvae, noses, and whole skulls were also present as part of various decorations in the house. Plus, the mother's room was untouched, almost as if it was kept as a shrine. Later reports revealed that Guy made multiple visits to the cemetery and would often find graves of people who had recently died. If the women resembled his mother in physical appearance, he would dig the graves, take out the corpses, and do unimaginable things to them just to make different clothing items and human masks. Investigations show that he planned on making a human skin suit because he wanted to literally crawl inside the skin of his mother. Guy was diagnosed with schizophrenia and declared not guilty by reason of insanity. For approximately 9 years, he remained in the Central State Hospital for the criminally insane. Then, he was put up for 2 trials without a jury. The sanity trial announced him as not guilty by reason of insanity. He spent the rest of his time at a mental hospital until he died at the age of 77 years. Number 7. Richard Ramirez, the Nightstalker. On February 29, 1969, Richard Ramirez was born in Texas, a made-to-be killer. His father was a raging alcoholic who would often beat his wife and children. Ramirez was the youngest of the 5 children and had trouble adjusting to the household. By the age of 10, he was using drugs and drinking alcohol to escape from the mess at home. Reports claim that Ramirez was made to be a psychopath. By the age of 6, he had been beaten nearly to death several times. As a result of those beatings, he had gained a terrible personality, with aggressiveness and hypersexuality as the main trait. By the age of 12, he had become inspired by his cousin, who had been in the Vietnam War as a military officer. Said cousin was also a serial killer, a trait that grew on Ramirez. He would teach Ramirez different military skills and would often boast about his evil deeds during the war, such as rape and killings. Instead of showing remorse, it all fascinated Ramirez. Later, his cousin ended his wife's life in a shooting, and that became the style of Ramirez in all of his crimes as well. The cousin was sent to the mental hospital, and Ramirez had to stay with his sister. Later, his cousin was released, and their bond grew significantly stronger over the years. They would both get involved in drugs and alcohol. This is also the time when Ramirez started admiring Satanism. In the next couple of years, he was involved in a lot of heinous crimes, but none escalated to murders. That is, until 1984, when the true horror began. His first victim was a 9-year-old girl who was living in his apartment. Ramirez manipulated her to come to the basement, where he ended her life. In less than a year, he started killing more and more victims. They all had a satanic symbol on their bodies, and the killer's name became the Nightstalker. In his later murders, Ramirez even announced his presence as the Nightstalker whenever he encountered any victim. He would force them to claim that they loved Satan after tying them up. Then, Ramirez would often resort to beatings, rape, stealing of precious items inside the house, and then ultimately killing the victims. Eventually, Ramirez slipped up. His fingerprint was found on a crime scene and matched. His photograph was quickly released to the public. A person identified him and reported him to the police. When the cops tracked him down, Ramirez was surrounded by a crowd who had beaten him up. In 1989, Ramirez was convicted of 13 murders and various other crimes, including drug abuse and burglary. He was sentenced to prison and a death row, but died of cancer in 2013. That's all on our video of the prisoners who were so dangerous that a prison sentence does not seem like enough punishment. What do you think about these notorious killers and their motives? Let us know in the comments. While you are commenting, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more such videos. Until next time, stay safe and goodbye.